Belt archived on my YouTube channel for some reason because I haven't uploaded in a long time. I got shit in the works. I'm planning on making some shit. I'm not gonna spoil what it is yet. Um, but I do absolutely have shit in the works.
Ha ha, 1 year ago, idiot! So when I said that shit, I wasn't lying. And I suppose I never really gave a release date for any of my projects, but holy shit, I did not expect it to take as long as it has taken to edit the project I'm currently working on. I guess it's my fault for writing an incredibly long script and also being a repugnant procrastinator. I've definitely learned some hard lessons in the past year, and I plan on uploading a lot more in 2026. I'm at least putting out 3 videos, because one is editing and the other 2 have scripts finished, so at least 3. Probably more. Gonna try for more. At least 3. Anyway, what else have I been doing this past year besides failing to complete fucking anything? Well, I've been reading a lot of comics. A lot of pretty damn iconic ones, too. X-Men, Dark Phoenix Saga, Superman Birthright, Batman, A Death in the Family, Marvels by Kurt Busiek. Really, really good stuff. But the comics I found myself enjoying the most were the ones I have actually heard the least people talk about. Usually, these were 1 to 2 issue, self contained stories, the kind of thing that could very easily go overlooked, and I feel these stories have been overlooked. So I wanted to end out this fucking insane year by sharing these hidden gems with whoever happens to give this video a try. If you already know me, sup. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Stupendous Horrendous, and here in no particular order are the best hidden gem comics that I have read in 2025. I'm going to start with Even in Death, a 1 issue story told in X-Men number 144, written by Chris Claremont, penciled by Brent Anderson, and inked by Joe Rubinstein. The story surrounds Scott Summers adapting to his new life working on the fishing boat Arcadia in the wake of his departure from the X-Men due to Jean Grey's death. Well, first death anyway. Scott has struck up a friendship with Captain Lee Forrester, with whom he also shares a mutual but unspoken attraction. While the Arcadia is docked and the crew are enjoying some downtime at a pub, Lee gets a call from her father, Jock, asking her to come home and implying all is not well. Lee invites Scott to accompany her while she checks to see if everything is okay. When they arrive at her father's house, the entity that greets them pretends to be Jock for a moment before revealing himself to be the demon Despair and saying he had influenced the terminally ill Jock to end his own life earlier in the day. Despair warps reality, forcing Scott to relive past traumas mingled with new nightmares before sending him over a balcony. Scott's will keeps him alive, and he has a brief encounter with the swamp-dwelling Man-Thing, an enemy of Despair. Together, they re-enter the warped temple that used to be Jock Forrester's abode, and save Lee from Despair's torture. Despair tries to regain control over Scott, but Scott's refusal to give up hope in the face of fear allows him to overpower the demon. Man-Thing takes over the fight with Despair, and in the blaze of their battle, the house is destroyed, with Scott and Lee barely getting out alive. The final page reveals Man-Thing survived. Even in Death is often overlooked, partially because it comes right after the iconic Days of Future Past storyline, which in turn ended John Byrne's legendary run as artist on the book. But I personally love this issue. It feels understated, self-contained, and like a bit of a breather after the epic gravitas of Byrne's run. It's kind of funny I call it a breather considering it's also quite horrific. But the horror is engaging, mostly because of Brent Anderson's gorgeous artwork. I honestly wish he had a longer run than 1 issue on the book, especially since after he left, Dave Cockrum, John Byrne's predecessor, would come back and stick around for 2 years. No disrespect to Dave Cockrum, may he rest in peace. He was one of the best character designers in the business, and his action was also very engaging. But I always kind of was irked by how bulbous he drew his heads, and that is a quirk that Brent Anderson does not have. What he does bring is real moody, almost gothic atmosphere, which is beautifully complemented by Rubinstein's inks. My favorite art in the issue is actually in the opening few pages, which depict Jock Forrester's suicide in an ethereal, dreamlike way. But my favorite thing about this issue overall is Claremont's writing. This man had already proven himself to be a magnificent storyteller time and time again, but there's something uniquely gorgeous about his writing in this story. His prose is poetry. But as he approaches the man, his attention is snagged by a patch of oily black smoke swirling across the ground. Its tendrils reach toward Jock, the eldritch cloud radiating an almost palpable aura of evil. Is that immaculate or what? In conclusion, X-Men number 144 is a great little book, and I highly recommend it. The next story I want to talk about is The Savage Bull Doth Bear the Yoke, told in Incredible Hulk number 341, written by Peter David and illustrated by Todd McFarlane. Like X-Men number 144, The Incredible Hulk number 341 is often overlooked because of what came before it. In this case, it was preceded by Hulk issue 340. You know, the one where Hulk is reflected in Wolverine's claws. Yeah, that's a tough act to follow. On top of having one of the most iconically badass covers on any Marvel comic ever, that issue also has McFarlane inking his own pencils for the first time on a Marvel comic, giving us an absolutely savage fight between the Hulk and Logan, while Peter David takes the opportunity to beautifully explore Wolverine's psychology and character development. It's a great issue to be sure, but I personally love its follow-up even more. While The Incredible Hulk 341 is part of an overarching narrative that encompasses all of Peter David and Todd McFarlane's run, it can very easily be enjoyed outside of that context. The only thing you really need to know is that the Hulk that Bruce Banner turns into at this point is not the big green dum-dum we all know and love. In this era, the Hulk had reverted back to the grim, gray bastard he was in his very first appearance, a personality that would later take the name Joe Fixit. The story starts with the Hulk, Bruce Banner's longtime confidant Rick Jones, and renegade S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Clay Quartermain arriving in a small Kansas town while on a cross-country mission to destroy a bunch of government-manufactured gamma bombs. They're in Kansas to visit Clay's computer whiz brother, Alan, and hopefully get him to hack the government and find out where the bombs are kept. All the while, a hybrid beast known as the Man-Bull is terrorizing the community, regularly feasting on cattle and even attacking a family. When Banner and company arrive at the Quartermain family farm, Alan refuses to help the fugitives in their quest until Alan and his wife find out about their neighbors being attacked by the Man-Bull. Clay uses this as leverage, promising that the Hulk will take care of the Man-Bull if Alan hacks for them. And while Alan and Bruce are both very reluctant, they are ultimately cajoled into the deal. A few other things happen, but it culminates in the Hulk and the Man-Bull duking it out. Yet there are more layers to this conflict than meet the eye. See, Man-Bull isn't a dumb animal. He was a victim of unethical scientific experiments, and after seeing Banner turn into the Hulk, he makes his intentions clear. Either the Hulk will help Man-Bull return to the man he once was, or one of them is going to die. So, while the battle is taking place, you're really feeling for this poor guy. Even Hulk feels for the guy, reminded of his greener, dumber, more innocent form, but still, Hulk is not equipped to help his adversary, and Man-Bull is ultimately too overwhelmed with despair to continue the fight. By now, a mob of townsfolk have arrived, bearing torches, pitchforks, and double barrels, but are taken aback when they see the creature that has menaced them broken down in tears. In a neat bucking of cliches, the angry mob have souls. And this moment, on the very last panel of the very last page, was the moment that made me really fall in love with this comic. As the Hulk leaves, he and the townspeople have a very profound dialogue exchange that I won't spoil because this comic really is worth reading yourself. Despite being a seemingly insignificant chapter in Peter David's longer run, it's easily my favorite Hulk issue that I've read all year. Another reason I love it so much is, of course, McFarlane's art. Every little line is given gritty, grimy texture that perfectly complements this more physically and morally gray version of the Hulk. While we're talking about Peter David's Hulk, I also want to shout out Incredible Hulk issue 344. It's not on the list proper because it's not nearly as self contained, and honestly, it's mostly sort of meh, but the conversation between Betty and Hulk is just magnificent. It shows the Grey Hulk showing a lot more humanity than he had ever shown before, and God, that last panel made me bawl my fucking eyes out, guys. It's heavy. It's heavy and it's gorgeous. And it's beautifully written. And Peter David's run overall has been really good so far, so definitely lives up to the hype. Now, we're not done with the Hulk yet. This time we're going even further back to the seminal Bill Mantlo run, specifically the iconic period drawn by Sal Buscema and Jerry Talauk. Talauk? Talauk? I think it's Talauk. This particular story comprises issues 302 and 303. The first of these issues is titled Lady of Life, City of Death, and the second of these issues is titled Growing Up is Hard to Do. I'm going to refer to this story as the Princess Duology. This story actually takes place in the larger Crossroads arc, in which a mindless Hulk has been banished to a cosmic way station called the Crossroads to protect the people of Earth from his wrath. Each issue or two involves him going through a different door into a different world, seeking tranquility, but ultimately never finding it. In this particular story, Hulk looks through one of the many doors and his eye is caught by a young, green-skinned princess imprisoned in a tower made of bones, shedding tears that turn into flowers. He enters this world and goes to the castle to see the girl, but is then set upon by the Iron Knights. Surprisingly, their conventional weapons badly wound him, and they're about to kill him until the green princess from the tower begs for his life. They leave the Hulk in the princess's care and make him a slave once he's healed. Between the princess's monologues to the Hulk and her wizard father's conversations with his apprentice, we learn that the Green Folk are a peaceful race subjected to genocide from the Iron Knights, who used the bones of the Green Folk to build their infernal city. Jesus, that might make this the darkest fucking comic I've read all year. To protect his people, the Green Wizard summoned a wall of roses to keep the Iron Knights out. But while this wall allowed the Greens to have paradise, it was also stifling and isolating. The wizard's curious daughter sought to see the other side of the wall, but that resulted in her kidnapping and betrothal to the leader of the Iron Knights. She had hoped the Hulk would come to rescue her, but this world for some reason renders him all but powerless. She realizes that in order to save her people and preserve their paradise, she must find the strength and rage her people have been denied for a generation. The same way her tears of happiness or sadness would turn to flowers and leaves, her tears of rage grow thorny, coiling vines, and ultimately even tree soldiers to vanquish the Iron Knights. However, the victory is bittersweet. Her people are saved, but her childhood innocence has died, like it must for all of us. The Hulk clearly feels more of the bitter than the sweet, as he chooses to depart and go back to the Crossroads. While this story might be lacking in the Hulk department given that he's kind of nerfed, it's still a great read, especially if you're a fan of sword and sorcery fantasy type stuff, which I definitely am. It's got a lot of flowery, poetic prose that I really dig, and the art from Buscema and Talauk is just gorgeous. The intricate detail on the architecture is very reminiscent of George Perez's work, which is definitely never a bad thing. I also love their character designs. The greens look willowy and floral, while the faces of the Iron Knights are gaunt and sneering. This one is also clearly a caricature of Marvel's controversial editor-in-chief of the time, Jim Shooter, which I think is very funny. And even though I mentioned Hulk's depowerment, he still works in the story. He serves as a good point of view character, being just as confused as us, while also exhibiting a surprising gentleness and nobility even in his mindless form. He also does get a couple good licks in between ass kickings. Last thing I want to mention is that I really like how Ken Bruzenak lettered the issue, making the words of the Iron Knights look medieval to add to the story's fantasy elements. Overall, it's a neat little tale that I highly recommend. Oh, I also want to mention another story from the Crossroads arc that took place in Hulk Annual issue number 13, an issue that made me ask, is this stupid little spine symbiote going to make me cry in this fucking laundromat? Yes. Yes, it did. He just wanted to see the fucking stars, god damn it! Excellent issue. Very moving. Highly recommend it.
Alright, we're done with the Hulk. Let's move on to some Batman. Specifically, a run on Batman that gets talked about a lot, but also doesn't. The run by Jim Starlin. On the one hand, this is one of the most talked about Batman runs because it features two of the most well-known yet controversial stories in Batman's history. There's 10 Nights of the Beast, in which Batman leaves the villain KG Beast to die, and A Death in the Family, in which Jason Todd, the second Robin, is beaten to death by the Joker. That's not to mention Starlin's much less controversial, or at least more beloved, miniseries Batman the Cult. These stories get talked about a lot in Batman fan circles, and yet, you didn't know they were by Jim Starlin, did you? Not offhand, at least. I certainly didn't for a long time. It's hard to make sense of Jim Starlin as a Batman writer since street-level vigilantes are not really his thing. This is the guy who wrote character-defining runs on Captain Marvel and Adam Warlock. He also wrote Infinity Gauntlet, which went on to inspire two of the highest-grossing movies of all time. This is the space guy. He loves the vast cosmos, alien worlds, living personifications of existential concepts. What the hell is he doing writing Batman? Well, there's one thing he loves that isn't exclusive to the stars. Brooding, self-destructive protagonists. When you keep that in mind, him coming to write Batman makes a lot more sense. But despite him writing some very well-known Batman stories, the story I'm talking about today is not one of them.
Content warning. This section of the video is going to be talking about misogynistic violence. Feel free to skip to the next chapter if that will upset you.
This is a story that I had never heard of in my life, but discovered by looking through Batman covers online, and this one, by Jerry Bingham and Anthony Tollin, caught my eye. It was so disturbing yet so evocative that I just had to check out the story it was attached to, and I was surprised with one of the best Batman stories I have read in my entire life. Like with the Hulk's Princess duology, the two issues that comprise this story have two different titles. Batman number 421 is titled Elmore's Lady, and Batman number 422 is titled Just Desserts. Collectively, I'm going to be calling this story The Dumpster Murders. It's also worth mentioning that Batman number 414, titled Victims, is technically the beginning of the Dumpster Murders, but it's not really as good as Batman numbers 421 and 422, and those issues can be enjoyed and understood without the context of issue 414. As the story begins, Batman is in Gordon's office discussing a series of murders with him. Over the past few months, an elusive killer has been murdering women and leaving their bodies in dumpsters around the city. 10 bodies have been found, but Batman has studied the killer's pattern and knows an 11th should have been found by now. But it hasn't. Frustrated with the lack of progress, Batman goes out hunting for crime and comes across two subhuman thugs beating up an old, mentally ill dumpster diver named Elmore. Batman makes quick work of them and talks with Elmore, who tells Batman that he's recently found a wife. Specifically, he says that he met her by a dumpster. Batman asks to meet Elmore's new bride, and Elmore leads him to the corpse of the dumpster slasher's latest victim. Batman gently extracts more information about that night from Elmore, learning in the process that he's not looking for one killer, but two. He then calls Gordon. The body is collected and Elmore is taken to Arkham. Gordon judges Elmore, but Batman expresses sympathy and defends the poor, lonely man from Gordon's scorn.
Also, I need to make it clear that necrophilia is never implied. He's literally kind of just honey, I'm homing. So yeah, he's not he's not, yeah.
And I have to break from the story breakdown real quick to just talk about how well Starlin writes Batman. Bruce Wayne is so utterly human in this story. He's just as brooding as ever, but his compassion is also emphasized. Not only is he kind to Elmore, he also tries to reason with a hostile street gang later in the story before kicking their asses. Most writers would have jumped right into the ass kicking, but not Starlin. He also has moments of hilarious deadpan humor.
The idiot pulls a gun on me. I'm just not in the mood for such nonsense.
But the best part about Batman's characterization is how damn smart he is. Batman gets called the world's greatest detective, but it's rare that he actually gets to do detective work. This story is a proper mystery, and following along with Batman as he solves it is really exciting. At the end of issue 421, he's found the killers, but knows he doesn't have a lot of legal standing to take them in. But at least now he knows. Issue 422 begins with a switch of perspectives. Last issue, the narration boxes were Batman's inner monologue. In this issue, we get the inner monologue of one of the killers. And the issue that follows is so interesting. It's fascinating and very disturbing how normal this guy is, how casual he is. He's not a cackling madman like the Joker or some brutish, mindless monster. He's just a garden variety misogynist. His monologues about women's lib and how men aren't men anymore and how you gotta put these whores in their place is the kind of thing you'd hear from, the uncle that your family doesn't invite to Thanksgiving anymore, or maybe one of the less savory YouTubers that never seems to leave your recommendations. By showing this vicious killer's attitudes to be a relatively normal level of repulsive, Starlin shows what the end result is of these entitled supremacist attitudes. Not every man who thinks like this is regularly violent to women, but every man who is regularly violent to women thinks like this. Ultimately, as the title says, the killer does get his just desserts, and it is so satisfying. I particularly want to highlight two moments where broken glass is used as a symbol for this man's downfall. The first moment is viciously cathartic, and the second moment is like some haunting shit. I don't know if this was Starlin's idea or that of the artist Mark Bright, but either way, Bright renders it beautifully. And even though I know the artist of issue 421, Dick Giordano, more as an editor than as an artist, he's clearly no slouch himself. Both of these issues look fantastic, and they read fantastically, and they are worth your time. This story is just a masterpiece and one of my favorite Batman stories I've ever read. And for those of you who have read it, fucking stone cold badass, isn't she? Oh, that was cool. I love her. Batman's moralizing at the end is pretty corny and disingenuous, though. I think Jason was a little more based. Whatever, still a masterpiece. Alright, it's time for the last story I want to talk about in this video, Angel, told in Superman number 659 by writers Kurt Busiek and Fabian Nicieza, and artists Peter Vale and Jesus Marino. This story is nestled right in between the two halves of Camelot Falls, a very emotionally powerful, if slightly messy epic
by Kurt Busiek and artist Carlos Pacheco. At the end of that story's first half, Superman was chastised by an ancient Atlantean warlock named Arion, who claimed that the forces of catastrophe would build to the point of global annihilation unless Superman allowed the next great catastrophe to happen. The framing device of this story is Superman pondering the warning he's been given by remembering one of his early adventures, and this early adventure takes up the bulk of the issue. The flashback begins with an elderly woman of faith named Barbara Johnson praying as she's about to be run down by a drunk driver. Superman swoops in and protects her, which causes her to believe her prayers were answered by an angel. We learn more about Barbara as she goes home. We learn that she's community-minded, trying to start a neighborhood watch in her home of Suicide Slum, but not enough people have any hope of changing things. When she arrives at her apartment, she sees a crisis happening on TV and prays for the people in danger. When Superman saves them, she begins thinking she may have a direct line to God, and by extension, Superman. She then goes on a walk, happens upon a robbery, and decides to test her belief. She chastises these heavily armed men and then prays, and Superman does show up before the criminals can shoot her. After they are dispatched, Superman tries to explain that his super hearing picked up the explosion and encourages Barbara to not put herself in harm's way, but she is steadfast in her faith. She begins seeking out crime, and Superman keeps coming to save her, but worries what will happen on the day he can't. Ultimately, that day comes. She gets shot by a gang leader while Superman is stopping a potentially world-ending threat. He hears everything, though, and is overwhelmed with guilt. Thankfully, she survives, and Superman visits her in the hospital, apologizing and explaining himself, but she makes it clear it wasn't his fault. She says she needed a lesson in humility, and also talks about predestination and how maybe her being shot was the only thing that could stir her community into uniting against crime and decay. Near the end of the monologue, she speaks about God, but what she says clearly applies to Superman as well, and what makes him such a great hero. He sends his gifts to protect us, but also to inspire us to do better. And then, right after that, she says some shit that makes me tear up. It's such a beautiful moment. Part of me wants to spoil it, but it really deserves to be read. As Superman remembers Barbara and looks at her activism after being shot, her leadership, her inspiring of younger generations, he realizes that he cannot acquiesce to Arion's demands. Sure, he can't save everyone, but he knows deep down he has to save anyone he can, because anyone could be another Barbara Johnson. Any one of them could go on to save others themselves, spread love and compassion and decency, improve their communities. How could Superman let any of that get snuffed out? How can he be expected to stand back and allow any human to die when he's seen how good humanity can be? To some people who know me best, it might be surprising that I like this story. Kurt Busiek has never publicly stated his religious affiliation, but this story pretty clearly has some strong Christian themes. And I am not a Christian. I feel pretty dubious about religion in general, and I personally cannot stand the perspective of everything happens for a reason. If the Holocaust was God's plan, I don't know what to tell you. And yet, I find the themes of this story very compelling, and I admire how it sticks to its guns. In the end, Barbara's faith is not shaken by her brush with death, but instead clarified and restored after being clouded by hubris. The story feels very rooted in that sense, like an actual parable from the Bible. It may not have a perspective I personally agree with, but I came away from it feeling enriched nonetheless. Even though this video isn't a ranking, this is probably the story I recommend the most. It's a wonderful read. I also gotta shout out Vale and Marino's pencils and inks. The art has some beauty to it, but also some real grit, and I think both of them serve this story very well. Before I leave y'all, I want to give you a couple more honorable mentions real quick.
The first is The Art of the Prank, another Busiek banger told in Superman number 660. It's a more goofy story involving a villain called the Prankster, and while it is a lot of fun, I actually like it a lot more for its examination of the prankster's philosophies and sense of honor. His narration shows an obvious respect for the Man of Steel despite his never-ending need to vex him. The other story I want to mention is Night Moves, told in Incredible Hulk number 360. This is another one from Peter David's run, and it's actually one that I read while writing this video. It involves the demons Despair and Nightmare trying to break Betty Banner's spirit in the wake of her separation from Bruce and a miscarriage. But they rope the Hulk in to make it more interesting, and this proves their undoing, as Bruce and Betty's love and belief in each other is too strong for either of them to fall. It's really moving, and I can't recommend it enough. And that's a wrap. I hope y'all will give these stories a try. I think they're very worth your time. I listed all the issue numbers in this video, but I understand that there are people like me who prefer collected editions, so I'm gonna write a comment and pin it, and it will list every story I talked about in this video and what collected editions I read them in. With all that said, I'd like to thank everyone who's still here for watching. Feel free to leave a like on this video if you liked it, share it if you know someone else who will like it, and subscribe if you liked it so much that you want to see more. Also, feel free to head down to the comment section, let me know you were here and what you thought. I'm Stupendous Horrendous, and I hope y'all have a wonderful day.